important to them. And often they will cite shop classes that
but we also want to bring that content in to that as well, so it's not one or the other, it's both.
What has to happen in a school to actually make one of these makerspaces work? What kind of support do you need to bring them through?
Well, I think we're still trying to discover that. I mean, I think it's complex. You know, like a lot of things.
you could buy equipment and you can outfit a room, which we did with a lot of biotech labs, and we had no students or skilled teachers to use it. So I don't think we want to repeat that. I've tried to sort of figure out organically what's the minimal viable makerspace in a way of how do you just get some tools and a committed, like a champion teacher that wants to make it happen. They don't have to have much experience in this, they just have to have a desire to make it happen. Students begin by building stools and tables that they're going to use and work on. It's a great initial project. So I think you can come at it different ways. But I think the thing that I find pretty fascinating is a word called culture. And schools have a culture. Some schools have a very positive, welcoming, supportive culture that invites people to be creative in projects. Others don't have that. I don't think you can take maker culture and just sort of put it into a school that doesn't have a supportive culture already. Maybe it would help transform that culture. That would be a positive outcome. But I think it works best when teachers are already sort of the mind that students matter, their work and their creative output matter, and we are facilitating that. I think that's a kind of a key thing for me. In some ways, what we're trying to do with makerspaces is have them sort of pulled into schools from the outside and keep many of the positive characteristics that they have being on the outside. So I think it's open. It's pretty clear teachers need support, they need help. They want help identifying projects, they want help working and thinking about how kids develop in these kind of spaces, and the right level of facilitation that leaves students in control of their work and it doesn't take it over. So I think there's a lot of, I call it we're still kind of forming a community of practice around what happens inside these spaces.
Are there any specific areas that you found, any specific types of schools that already have this culture embedded in them, or is it varied by geography or income or anything like that?
Not from my point of view, certainly not geography, but I found, I know one particular school, the West Sacramento Prep that we worked with, and they were already organized around projects and what students do, whether regardless of the class. It was sort of a unifying idea that students, sort of their response and their development is expressed through projects. So I thought we were just introducing new tools and ways of thinking about what you could build as a project, and students were evaluated on the basis of their, the work they did in the project. So that's a huge step right there.
Yeah, I think, I work with Khan Academy, and we've done a lot of implementations for hands-on projects and things in different schools. We work with Santa Rita Elementary in Los Altos, and we've worked with teachers who haven't done a lot of making before, and they've done an excellent job of actually trying to implement these programs. But I think to Dale's point, it's a very dynamic thing. You don't know what you don't know, and so the best approach is to really kind of be willing to try and fail as a program along with the students who are trying something new. I definitely think that having a predicated culture of support is critical, because a lot of these things are difficult and they're not straightforward, and that's what makes them rich learning experiences.
I also think that something that I commonly see is the idea that if we put a bunch of machines in a room, we will have a makerspace or a learning center or a fab lab. And I think much like in years past before this movement was taking effect, we were working a lot in computer labs, and there was a big movement to cite computer labs, especially in low-income. Technology is changing people's lives, but the truth of the matter is oftentimes when I would walk into such a lab, it would be a bunch of computers collecting dust on tables. And so I think that the most important gap that needs to be bridged is one that connects the people to the technology in really meaningful ways. So just like the makerspace could very well be something at a school that maybe it has less tech but has more engagement in making things in a more simplified way and then growing into the more advanced technology. I think that the connecting of the people to the tech in a way that's meaningful to them is really where the magic happens.
If I could add on that, I think one of the things to see it as an interdisciplinary space, not a class. It can be used by classes, but like a library, it can be used for different purposes, personal, schoolwork, and we're finding that teacher might bring it in because they're interested in math and things. They're also involving the art teacher, and the art teacher says, "Oh, we could use 3D printers to do some of this that we're thinking about," and the librarians are getting interested in it as well. What are we doing in the school library? So I think we're still kind of figuring that out. But I like one of the things I thought was fascinating is one space is the teachers started using the space themselves to learn the equipment, but largely to build instructional aids for their classes. Like to take a whiteboard material and etch a polar graph or a map on it, so they are using that with markers instead of printing out 40 sheets on paper each time they're doing it. So some really interesting developments there that I think were unexpected.
It's interesting. It sounds like culture was yeah. In terms of finding the right type of school, the right culture to work in, should maker programs be integrated into the curriculum, or do you see it better as an after-school program, some combination of the two?
My personal approach on that is they should definitely be integrated into the curriculum, because I think they augment the curriculum. And again, back to the content piece that I was saying, they give you a lot of different ways to intersect with the content to make it meaningful. There are a lot of after-school opportunities that, like First Robotics is usually an after-school kind of thing, excellent program, but I think there's an opportunity, especially as we look at online content providers giving teachers an ability to sort of open up what's happening in the classroom and maybe flip the classroom and provide some space there. What are we doing in the classroom that's making the students more motivated and is giving more meaning to the content? I think this is a huge opportunity for makers to come into the classroom and actually add something new.
Yeah, in the perfect world, we'd have them in all these spaces because how you really do learn this. In my talk yesterday, I was talking about the informal versus formal education. And we learn an awful lot informally, outside of school. And so some of it is focused on the community. We want communities that have lots of opportunities for you to learn how to do things. Just engage in that. And I think to some degree, the hardest place for us to get into is into the school day, both because of the limitations of block scheduling, the limitations of how we see things like STEM and testing. But I believe it belongs there, as Carl said. But I want it to be transformative of the school day, not just fit in. Like we can make a hands-on activity last 15 minutes, and that's just fine. And the other 45 minutes will be lecture. I think we're missing the point if that's kind of what we're just squeezing in activities serially.
And I know Katie's got a lot to say about integrating into the community.
Me? So I think there's a program right now that I'm working on that I could reference. So I'm working with a school every day in partnership with UCSD. And one of the things that we're doing there is we're starting an after-school maker program. It's beginning as an after-school program, but the idea is that this will be something that the educators that are already on staff working there can come in and see what's happening. The fact that we do have the University of California, San Diego tie, and we can actually accredit the class kind of gives us this in where we can show, hey, this is definitely meeting your academic standards, this is going to be something that you can track and quantify, but at the same time, what we're really doing is taking our methodology, our approach, and essentially running it through a secondary process that enables us to show that it is something that people can recognize on paper. But the format will be the same. It will be an informal learning environment. It will be a place where people can come and they can do art projects or they can build robots. They will have a lot of different opportunities before them. The idea then is that we aim to not just inspire the kids, but inspire the instructors that are already working there as well. And we're working with them to figure out how can we bring this into your classroom. So for example, we're talking with a science teacher about whose current curriculum has to do with teaching students about viruses. So we're talking about, wow, we could 3D print virus structures to show how the actual form affects their function in the body and this sort of thing. So we're trying to find a lot of bridges into actually bringing this stuff into their classrooms. And they're excited about it. The most common thing I hear is we're just not sure how yet. So I think the idea is that if we can at least start in the after school, then we can start to work our way into the school day.
There's a gap that's not peculiar to making, but it's really hard to link these places together. So the kid that's in the after-school program, nobody knows what they do in school. The kid in summer camp doesn't know what they do in after school. So it's really a challenge. What I worry about is if making is in after school and you do really well at it, your teachers aren't recognizing that. Right? They don't know that the kid they could take advantage of that somehow in the classroom. So I think of it's ideally something that might be addressable with data, just in the sense that, we talk about patient records in healthcare, that, you go to different healthcare providers and, you want them to know what your history is at some level. So I think it would be good in education for us to be able to kind of look at this. This is a kid that does well in school or doesn't do well in school. We'd like to know that, and in particular, if we're creating environments for them to know more about them. And while we could ask and collect some data like that, typically the data is not managed in any way that would be trackable longitudinally.
Yeah, I think that the emergence of e-portfolios and what's happening there is a tremendous opportunity for closing some of those gaps and saying there's multiple ways to evaluate student learning and success.
I agree.
Are there any specific types of data you're looking for engagement that you're thinking about?
Well, I think there's a lot of data, but I think the most interesting is actually more narrative, where students begin to keep that record of their own work, and they can look back and say, well, last summer I did these kind of projects. And oftentimes the kids are repeating the same thing they did the year before because nobody really knows what kind of work. And I think crucial to making is that kids are making choices based on their interests and where they want to go. And I'd say that I think the biggest challenge in school sometimes is letting the kids loose, letting them go, because they can put this stuff together and move very quickly. We're often holding them back and saying, don't open the package until we're all, on the same page with you. So it's kind of like, like testing, don't turn the page. So they're ready to turn the page much faster than we allow them. And I think to create that record, like in the portfolio, is to really be able to say, look at my growth and development. And as I was mentioning yesterday, that's what we want to measure. And we don't measure it quantitatively, largely, at work or any place else. We do measure it to our peers and through other people. We have people look at what we do and give us feedback. So portfolios are not only valuable to sort of within a structure of a program, but they also connect kids out to a community. And I can't tell you how many people in the maker community find opportunities because they've published their project. Just Carl, what you've done is really, in a sense, you're a Khan Academy because you started publishing the work that you were doing in your high school. It's a really fascinating thing that's already happening kind of in a grassroots way. We want to get, and if I'm not making the point explicit that I should, that we really ought to be teaching social media as part of this. The digital media is part of this. If you take these works and things that you're creating, take a picture of it, tell us why you did it, how you did it, and what you learned by doing it in the simplest form would be a huge benefit to the kids.
And from a data standpoint, I think there's a huge opportunity, specifically if we're going to go into the classroom, to say, how do we meaningfully link the content to the project so that the student doesn't just produce a cool robot or a cool boat and not understand any of the principles behind how it works. So I think that's a huge opportunity for us because it's a completely different discipline to sort of think about the abstract content and the actual physical product. Those are very different, and the people that are good at the hacking and making a lot of times don't want to spend a lot of time on the content. But if we can find a way to merge those things, I think we've got a huge opportunity.
Yeah. Let me just to create a little lively. Let me disagree.
All right.
I think school wants to evaluate the theoretical and the abstract thinking and elevate that and versus applied. And I'll take an example of computer programmers. Most of them today, and this is one study of developers from O'Reilly who published books on computers, and most of them are self-directed learners who have learned to program outside of school. Now we would consider that to be 21st century learning, right? In all qualities, in terms of the skill level and the attributes such as creative, collaborative. They learned to do it outside of school. They had an interest in programming for games. They didn't take computer science degrees. So I can hear the academics say, well, they're not really programmers because they didn't take CS courses. Bullshit. It really, I'm not sure all that matters. I mean, I think they could see themselves as craftsmen, and valid. Now there is a role for those who do that, but to some degree, our world is built on layers, and we don't understand. We can write an iPhone app without understanding, the hardware behind it. And we can do a lot. We can use machines without saying, well, I kind of understand the mechanism of that. So I think it's, or the theoretical operations of it. So I sometimes feel like there's a danger in the school setting of saying, learn, you can make this, but we're going to teach you that. And I almost want to say, just focus on that, on the making, and that will come. That will come either through their own curiosity or creating a context which they need to know that. And we shouldn't, there's I remember talking to the U.S. Academy of Engineering, and they were so proud of the idea of pushing engineering into the 4th grade or the 3rd grade, and I got like, why? Let's get them to do stuff, and let's not even call it engineering. But from a professional standpoint, it meant a lot to have that labeled as, well, now you understand the theories of engineering. I would just rather kind of focus. I think you learn a tremendous amount through the process of making that we don't quite understand and appreciate fully. And I just don't want to kind of use it as a bait and switch sort of thing, that we're using that, now here's the textbook.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there has to be a meaningful link. And my struggle is that I've seen projects before where students have done really cool things, but they didn't learn any of the stuff that the course was supposed to be teaching them. So when they go through school, you know, they're not prepared for whatever they're going to get from a more abstract state standard requirement standpoint. So there is a tension there. I totally agree that it's absolutely meaningful, and the passion that comes from doing something and making something is what's going to contribute to their learning long term. But I do think a school has a responsibility to ensure that students do get some of that other content so that when they get to more advanced courses, they're prepared.
And how would assessment work in that kind of situation?
I think that's a huge issue right now. I mean, because one of the things that we deal with all the time is that we need to prepare the students that we work with for college or career, and they deserve that. And so therefore, because we are attempting to give them a boost in life, especially when we're working with lower income kids who are very specific about needing and wanting to get into a particular work skill track, we really, at this point in time, have to kind of meet the needs and requirements of the greater, you know, society, if you will, by giving them things on paper that have certified that they have done something by an agency which is recognized. So that's fine, we can do that, but there's always a little bit of a tug between, you know, that maker magic that we really know is what got these kids the soft skills and the presentation capability and the ability to walk into somebody's office and shake their hand and say, I'm capable of doing things. And I know that because I have done things. I have produced things. Nobody can tell me that I'm no longer, you know, nobody can tell me that I'm not capable because I have proof. So in my eyes, that is the proof. The little robot that a student has built and designed and programmed is an absolute tangible outcome, if I've ever seen one, of the application of their understanding of these concepts. It's a little bit hard, though, still at this point, to, you know, get everybody else to believe that sometimes, especially in academic settings. So I think that as a larger educational community, now is really a time for us to think through that problem and think about how can we get the quantifiable outcomes that we need in a way that doesn't put our kids into such boxes, into such strict boxes.
Yeah. And I guess what I'm kind of advocating is I think making is disruptive of that academic community, and that's a good thing. It's not the only thing that's disrupting it, but there's a lot of change happening, and I don't think it's a matter of just quietly fitting in. It is sort of being part of that disruption, because I think that's an overwhelmingly positive force. If you break down some of these standards and some of these things, it kind of like, well, who's making those decisions about what the value is? Is the market making that decision based on careers? Is it, how do we really know that? And, at the same time, we have employers saying, schools are producing kids that don't have real value to fit into the workplace. So we can't really assume that that they know what they're doing, I guess, is how I would look at it.
When I ask employers, what are you looking for in a student, because we're attempting to prepare them for that, and I'm talking to employers in technical fields, they tell me that they see so many resumes, they see so much paper, and people that look great on paper, but then when they get into the environment, they don't have the ability to apply their knowledge in the way that the employer might have hoped. So I have heard time and time again, if a student brings to me, or if an applicant has a record, an online portfolio, whatever it might be, that shows that they have done things that are relevant to our field and impress us even, that's so much more powerful than, the perfect, polished resume.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And I think that especially things that are custom designed completely from scratch. The students took, parts and Arduinos and other things together and created their own device and went through the troubleshooting process and had to create the framework for problem solving. That's an extremely valuable thing for an organization, because then they're able to solve problems, they're able to find the problems and then solve the problems, as opposed to having the organization have to hand the problems to you, which is what schools generally have done in the past, is provide you the set of problems and then you provide the answers. The harder thing to do is find the problems to solve.